every single Wednesday. Of course, we have him on. Very excited to get our good friend Anthony Treash of Pro Football Focus. Anthony, I'm digging the headgear, my guy. I'm digging the lid. What's going on? How are you?
I'm just trying to match your headgear because every single week it seems like you have like the best hat I've ever seen. So you're doing good work there from a branding perspective. A lot of great merch from what I see. But yeah, I got to rep the old faithful today.
Dude, I love it, man. I think I'm going to have to snag me a PFF hat. That's fire.
Oh yeah,
I do like that a lot.
we'll make it happen. We need to get our store up and moving. We've changed our logo a few times, but yeah, we'll make something happen.
Well, we'll do it. We'll do a little Beamer Ball for PFF swap. We got to get the good word of Beamer Ball out there to the Pro Football Focus boys. Anthony, again, I appreciate you taking the time, man. It's always a pleasure, obviously, to chat with you every single Wednesday. And man, I know South Carolina obviously didn't play this weekend, but what a weekend of college football it was, man. When you look across, it felt like I don't want to speak for all of them because I'm not going to say I sat there and watched the entire slate and all the top games, but it felt like this was a weekend that delivered. You know, you get some weekends where you have these highly anticipated matchups and they're either blowouts or they're boring or they just don't live up to the hype. Tennessee, Bama alone, that made the weekend. Just talk about the weekend that was in college football, and obviously the game of the weekend was that game in Knoxville.
Yeah, I mean, there's always that a little bit of recency bias. Where you're like, that was the best weekend of football we've ever seen, and it definitely right now you have to say it's one of the best, definitely the best that we're going to see all year. Just again, Tennessee Bama alone, I think that game made it as great as what it was. But then you throw in Oklahoma State, TCU coming back for the victory, USC, Utah. I mean, just a lot of great games all throughout the slate, which was kind of hyped up as the biggest slate of the season. So it definitely lived up to the hype. And now we got a lot of interesting playoff talk that's going to be coming here in a few weeks with that Tennessee Bama result. We'll see if Tennessee can hang on with Georgia. I'm a little doubtful right now that they're going to be able to. I think it's a little bit worse of a matchup for them. But overall, you can't complain. This is why I love doing what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm. How do you see what do you think the committee will have to do? Let's just play the hypothetical game and make you squirm a little bit. Georgia, Bama, Tennessee. Let's say Ole Miss. They all finished with one loss. How does that play out, man? Because you can't put them all in, I don't think, right? But, I mean, it's going to be hard if Tennessee's only loss, let's say, is a field goal loss to Georgia between the hedges, and Bama ends up beating Georgia in the SEC title. Again, they all have one loss. How do you keep a Tennessee out with the best offense in college football?
That's a good question. That's definitely the scenario where the committee is like, I'm praying that does not happen because people from all over will be coming for them. I don't think that's going to happen, but hypothetically, if it did, I mean, that's definitely going to be the hardest decision that they ever have to make, and that's why they're going to be okay. Looking forward to this 12-team playoff that we're getting ready to go to here in a few years. I think in that scenario, gosh, I don't know. I don't know. You probably put all three in there because at that point, you look over in the Pac-12. I don't think we're going to see an undefeated champion. I know we still have UCLA in there, very good one-loss teams, but I think they're all going to kind of beat each other up. Big Ten, that's where it gets interesting. I think you look at, Ohio State, Michigan, you got to just kind of take the winner there. You can't take the loser anymore. And you go to the ACC, and if Clemson's still undefeated, that's when the problems really kind of come out. So that's definitely, I think, the toughest situation. And I don't know, maybe it's Georgia that gets left out of that picture. I don't know. I don't envy him for that decision, but that's what's going to make the rest of the season so great.
Yeah, as someone, I said this on social media yesterday, Anthony, but as someone who, my team's obviously out of it, has no impact. Well, it could have an impact, I guess, that Tennessee game late in the season, but it's not going to make the playoff. I'm just pulling for pure chaos. I personally just want to see chaos and see the committee squirm a little bit and have to rack their brain of who's in, who's out, whatever. Anthony, let's dive into the game this weekend, obviously, in Columbia. Both Texas A&M and South Carolina coming off bye weeks. Let's start with the Aggies. Offensively, it has been a rough go of things, dead last in the SEC in total offense, averaging just 21 points per game. Quarterback situation's been a nightmare. You lose Aniyah Smith on the outside, Devon Achane. He's kind of, it's funny, South Carolina and A&M, and you can correct me if you feel differently, but I feel like these two teams are almost kind of mirror images of each other in some ways. Both have offensively struggled. Both feel like they kind of lean on their defenses a little bit, and both need this game badly, call it for what it is. But on the Aggies side of things, we'll start with their offense. What do the numbers tell you, and what do you see from them? Obviously, Haynes King right now, I think, is going to be a game-time decision, it sounds like. If not, they're going to go with the 5-star Wegman kid. I don't really know how much of a difference that even makes because it's not like Haynes King has played great football. Just your overall thoughts on the Aggies on the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah, offensively, that was a big question with them heading into the season, and it was really just because of the quarterback position. And it's been worse than even it was imagined, right? I thought I was a little cautious to say Texas A&M is going to be a playoff team because of the quarterback position, and it's even worse than I thought it would be. If Haynes King plays, I mean, honestly, that's probably the best case scenario for South Carolina because while Connor Wegman, he's a 5-star, I get it. He's not going to perform like a 5-star right away, but we still don't really know what he could be out on the field. With Haynes King, I think we have a good idea of what he is at this point, and it's not very good. I mean, you look at what he's done against, FBS opponents. He's played 4 games this year, one against Sam Houston. You throw that one out, he's averaging 5 yards an attempt, completion percentage just above 50. No big time throws, 4 turnover-worthy plays. I mean, it has not been good. And like you said, you lose Nia Smith. That's damaging for this Texas A&M offense. Devon Chain, I think he's definitely one of the more boomer bust runners. He can either take it 80 yards or, he kind of gets stuffed there. That's just the way he kind of plays. The offensive line has been underwhelming. I thought they were going to be one of the best groups in the country. We really haven't seen them perform up to that level. So offensively, it's just been pretty bad all around. I know a lot of people are like, oh, well, they were close with Bama. They almost beat them. I mean, again, I go back to Bama just didn't have Bryce Young, right? You don't have the best quarterback in college football. Jalen Milroe is definitely talented, but he's no Bryce Young. He had pretty significant issues throwing the ball in that game, and he was the reason why that game was as close as it was. It was nothing to do with Texas A&M offensively. Defensively, they have pieces to be excited about, but offensively, it's pretty bad. And just overall, you probably have to say this game might be the most, I'd say the most impactful or most important game of the weekend in terms of non-ranked opponents, because you get Texas A&M, they lose. We're going to have some interesting Jimbo Fisher conversation sitting there at 3-4. South Carolina, they get to 5-2. They got 2 favorable opponents up next. They can kind of get on a run there. So I think it's a lot of intrigue with this matchup. But again, for Texas A&M offensively, I think South Carolina should probably be hoping they see Haynes King run out there just because, again, we know what kind of ceiling he has. Connor Wegman, he's not going to perform well right away, in my opinion. I mean, it's very hard for a 5-star to do that even. But again, we just don't really know what he can do.
Yeah, it's interesting. I talk key matchups, Anthony, for every single game, and I think it's a really fun matchup to see these 2 running backs go against each other. I heard a lot of chatter going in the Kentucky game how I think it was Marcus Lattimore that actually said it, the great South Carolina back, that as a running back, you go into games like this where maybe the other side's being talked about so much. Chris Rodriguez was getting all the hype and the praise going in that Kentucky game, and it gives a guy like Marshawn Lloyd a chip on his shoulder. But this features 2 of the best in the SEC, and A-Chain and Lloyd. I think that's going to be a really fun battle to watch. Just kind of the 2 teams I think probably will have to lean on their running games and are most successful when they're doing so. You look at A&M on the defensive side, giving up 18 points per game. What do you see from the Aggies there, Anthony? Obviously, again, you hope for South Carolina's sake that in that second half in Lexington you sort of found something. What are the challenges that Texas A&M presents on that side?
Yeah, I mean, you look at their secondary, and when healthy, that group could be one of the best in college football. They've had some injuries, and I think that's going to be something to monitor going into this game. Tyreek Chappell didn't play against Bama. Last year, he was one of the best true freshman corners. He's been playing great when he's on the field this year. Jalen Jones played against Bama, has been banged up, though, all throughout the season. And, of course, I think you have Antonio Johnson, who is still – it's like there was a lot of hype around him, and now we're starting to see that kind of simmer down a little bit. I still think he deserves a lot of hype. He's a slot corner last year. I thought he was quite easily the best slot corner in college football this year. More of a safety role. Numbers, he's less around the ball as much, so you don't hear his names called as much. But still, he's a dang good safety, and I wouldn't, overlook him at all going into this matchup to make a big play. Damani Richardson, of course. So there's a lot of great pieces in that Texas A&M secondary, and if it's fully healthy, it's going to be really, really hard to kind of throw the rock against him. So that's kind of something I'm looking at for them, is just, are they fully healthy? Do they have all their guys there? And do they look like they're healthy? And are they playing up to their form? And if so, it's going to make it even more interesting. So that's my biggest kind of takeaway from looking at this Texas A&M defense and watching them, and all the data supports it. I mean, some of their highest graded players are some of those defensive backs, just very good players kind of limiting their side of the field.
Now, I think it's interesting, Anthony, in this game, and again, we talk numbers with you and sort of, the Vegas side of things and the spreads and the totals, and it's interesting because I thought this game would probably open up as about a pick 'em. Both sides, South Carolina's won 3 in a row. A&M's sort of reeling, but we know they have talent. They play Bama close on the road. And I don't care what just happened in Knoxville. Bama's Bama. But A&M opens up as a 4-point favorite. I think the number sits at 3.5 now. Total sitting at 44.5 right now. So Vegas expecting a low-scoring game and expecting the Aggies to edge out South Carolina. And you look at the series history. South Carolina's never beaten A&M. 0-8 against the Aggies, an average margin of defeat of 19 points per game in those 8 games. And the last 3 matchups have been pure blowouts. Your thoughts on the spread and your overall vibe on this game, and how much do you think the series history goes into sort of the feeling, the national feeling, if you will, about this matchup?
I thought it would be a little bit more, it's a little bit larger, not significantly so. I didn't think it would cross that 7 mark. And in college football, you don't have those key numbers as much, but with a low scoring game like this, you kind of do. I thought it'd be around 6.5 or so. So I was a little surprised. I was kind of on the opposite end there. But then again, I'm not a betting expert, so that's just kind of my guess. But I think I look at that, and you're definitely going to see a low scoring game, in my opinion, unless we see some offensive tweaks from South Carolina. And that's the biggest thing in college football, because you typically see most of these offenses, if they're struggling a little bit, there's some disagreements, you're going to see some changes after that bye week. We see it all the time with a bevy of teams. And I think South Carolina is kind of one to monitor. I'm curious if they're going to kind of stick to their guns, or they're going to change some things up. Like we talked about Nazim, just let Seven play his game. I'm going to be curious to see if they're kind of doing that, or if it's still going to be pretty safe, conservative, quick scheme throws. Don't let the passing off kind of losing the game type of thing. So if they're kind of stick with that, I could see it being low scoring. And so I kind of go back and just looking at the history. It's almost one of those games where you want to remember it, but just throw it out, because this is a completely different Texas A&M team. And again, it goes back to that quarterback position, because if you had to rank all the Power 5 quarterback situations, there's a reasonable argument to be made that, at least for this season, I know next year and the year after it'll change with Connor Wyman and his development, but right now it's one of the worst. And I don't think anybody can argue differently. And I think that's what kind of makes this a different matchup from what we've seen historically. So, again, 2 defenses that are playing sound. I look at South Carolina's defense too, which is interesting. We talked about how much they're just very aggressive. They're bringing heat, sending several guys in there, very blitz heavy. And they kind of took the wheels off a little bit, backed off a little bit against Kentucky, and it worked out for them. I think in this game, I was a little critical, and I was like, you don't have to do it that much. But this game, I'm all for it, because this is a group that has struggled against these types of defenses all throughout the season. So if you get them, maybe just under 50% of the time, like they've kind of been averaging all year long, I think we could see some possible mistakes from Haynes King or whoever it is under center forward, Texas A&M. So, I think it's a different matchup. I think it's very evenly matched in a lot of ways. And I think ultimately it's going to come down to, as typically, but the quarterback position. Which one is not going to make a mistake? I think if there's a quarterback that doesn't throw a pick in this game, I'm going to say that team probably wins.
I know I've already said it. I'm going to sound like a broken record, Anthony, but this is a huge game for Rattler, man. I just, at some point, it's like, because I really thought over the summer, I don't think I had unreasonable expectations for him. I really don't. And I think there's so many other moving pieces that maybe have not clicked that have caused him to not have the production or the numbers, or, how much do you put on play calling, O-line, receivers, himself, whatever. You can spread the blame out. But I said over the summer that I really felt like Spencer Rattler was going to have a game or maybe 2 where after that game's over, he leads the Gamecocks to victory. And you kind of look at that as a game like he put the team on his back. You wonder when that's going to come, if that's ever going to come. And what's so frustrating, I know, is like you mentioned, we know Seven has the talent. It's not like this is some 5-star guy that you're kind of hoping to see it. It's happened before. You know what I mean? It's literally happened before. And so I guess with matchups like these in these swing games, like you mentioned, this is where you need your guy to show up and show out. And big-time players win big-time games. We can talk coaching till we're blue in the face. We can talk play call, but big-time players make big-time plays, man. I think in a game like this, you kind of feel like, I know I said it going into Lexington, and I guess I was proven wrong, because you didn't get truly above average or elite quarterback play. I guess you did in that second half, and you see what happened, but you still won the game, right? But kind of just feels like one, like you mentioned, man, in the SEC week in, week out, you can't make a living with subpar quarterback play. It's going to catch up with you. So they're going to need 7 to be at his best on Saturday night.
100%. And I think this is kind of a game where we're really going to find out where the issues have lied. Is it really all, 7? Is it all the coaching? I think we'll probably get a good idea with this game. And I think honestly, we could see a situation. I wouldn't be surprised where, he may not be told to play his game, but he goes and plays his game anyway. And, he's trying to make those out of structure throws and try to put on the cape. I know they don't want him to do that anymore, but this could be a game where he starts to do that. And just like, I'm going to do it. We need it. And it's honestly, I'm looking horrible right now, both from a data perspective and the eyes of everyone. So I wouldn't be surprised if that's a situation that plays out. But I mean, I think this is probably, honestly, probably the biggest game he's maybe ever had, and one of the biggest games. I mean, this is a career-altering game in my opinion, because if he goes out there and he lights up this defense, which again, it's a very good defense on the back end, and let's say South Carolina wins with multiple touchdowns, we're going to have a lot of interesting conversations, and I think a lot of people across the college football landscape are going to say, okay, is he back? Are we going to see the same type of player that we were all expecting? If so, I mean, South Carolina's 5-2. They got Mizzou and Vandy, and they got a Florida team that's kind of struggling a little bit. Next thing you know, you're like, okay, well, can they make a big run here and kind of be that sleeper team that no one saw coming in the second half of the season? So it's definitely a major game, major game for 7, and also the coaching staff. Because again, I think we're going to see, where there have been some problems. We're going to see where those problems actually lie.
Anthony, switching gears a little bit, when you look at Tennessee, right, because I found it so interesting. Obviously, everybody was watching that game, but certainly all of Gamecock Nation was watching and talking about it. And I think it stung a little more, obviously, because they're one of our yearly rivals in the SEC East that we have to play or what have you. But when you look at them offensively, I think the entire country is looking at Tennessee offensively, obviously. They're number 1 in all of college football. What are they doing, do you think, that's making them so successful on that side? Because I think that's what Gamecock fans are having the toughest time coming to terms with, is that Heupel and Beamer took over at the same time. But obviously in the year and a half or so since those two coaches have been at their respective schools, things have gone wildly different on the offensive side for Tennessee. And I don't feel like many South Carolina fans, whether this is accurate, inaccurate, or whatever, felt like the two programs were on very unequal footing in regards to talent, even on the offensive side. So when you look at Tennessee, what do you feel like they're doing that has made them so successful, whether it be scheme-wise? I mean, is it really just personnel? Is that great? What are they doing? What do you see that makes the Volunteers so lethal offensively?
I mean, I could probably talk hours about Tennessee's offense just in general. I could write a book on it. I could do a documentary. I love it. Me and my pal Seth Galena, he works here at PFF too. We talk football a lot. And I remember when this hire happened a couple of years ago, Coach Heupel going from UCF to Tennessee, and he ended up writing the piece. But we were talking about it, like, man, this could be huge. I mean, introducing this offense at the SEC level. So what they do, I mean, this is pretty vague, but I mean, they go sideline to sideline, right? I actually have a chart over on my Twitter at PFF_Anthony where you can kind of see the differences with the SEC offenses, but they take up sideline to sideline formation width. It's around 40 yards. It's like 8 yards more than any other offense in the SEC. FBS average is like 29, if I recall correctly. So it's a little bit different, and they also go up tempo, right? I mean, it's more than anybody else. And you look at like their average play clock remaining, it's above 20 seconds. Right. And the average is like 7 seconds slower than that. It's one of the highest in college football. So they're spreading you out. They're going quick, and they're trying to attack you vertically. So if you play single high coverage, if they catch you in that, and they got those two guys on the outside, what the quarterback's taught to do, Hendon Hooker, I mean, he's very good at it. You just watch him. It's cerebral. Just looks at the safety. He's staring at the safety. He knows he's going one side, right? Whatever side he has the better leverage battle on, he's going to. And he just sits there. And you can see him. He just turns, go ball, and he's the guy that can fit that type of offense. And I think that's the biggest thing. I saw last year when they brought in Joe Milton and Hendon Hooker, I said Hendon Hooker is the better guy for that. He actually has the accuracy to kind of hit those plays downfield, and it's not a difficult offense. I actually think it's one of the easiest offenses in college football, and I put out a quarterback rankings piece this past week, and I had Hendon Hooker, I think, 8th. A lot of people were kind of upset about that, saying, he should be number 1, he should be top 3. And it's it's kind of hard to evaluate him because the offense is so friendly compared to what everybody else is doing, even in college football where there's a lot of friendly offenses. And I think that's when the pro evaluation aspect kind of comes into debate there. But they have the right guys. You look at somebody like Cedric Tillman, who didn't play against Bama, but he's been great before he got hurt. You know what he can do from a physicality perspective. But they have Jalen Hyatt. I always said Jalen Hyatt. I need to find it somewhere. I need to dig this up. It's one of the few times I'll ever take a victory lap. But you look at Jalen Hyatt, and I said a few years ago, this guy could be a game changer for this offense because he has the speed. He has exactly what they need. And you saw against Bama, it wasn't his route running ability. I mean, of course, they were fine. It was great in that regard. But the reason why he had 5 touchdowns because he was faster than anybody else on that field. And you can just see him burn him, just cooking them right from the get go and getting over the top of the defense. And Alabama also kind of played him poorly, in my opinion. And I'm sure everybody else would say the same thing, obviously. But they have the personnel there. I think it's one of the best offenses in college football. I mean, he really made Coach Heupel made Dylan Gabriel who he was before he got hurt last year, which is one of the best quarterbacks in college football, and hurt this year. I mean, they're running kind of I would say the same thing in Oklahoma, but something similar. So I think it's just well designed. I think it's very tiring, for those players, and I think too. I mean, it's just very play action oriented, and so it also sucks in those guys on defense. And with that up tempo, it really tires out those guys too. So they're very physical in the run game. You get those guys that are tired, but then you also have a quarterback who I mentioned that he knows how to make the throws. He goes out and carries out the offense by design, but he's also athletic. He can also run. You add another element to that. It's just so much to deal with from a defensive perspective. It takes the defenses out of their comfort zone. And it's just an awesome offense. I mean, it truly is. So that's kind of in short what Tennessee does and why they're so successful. So I wouldn't say like with Alabama, I think is Alabama this year because of Bryce Young, and I think we kind of saw it against Texas A&M. But with Tennessee, it's not because of Hendon Hooker. I think he's obviously a great deal of that, but I think it's because they have just the perfect system and they have the perfect guys to run that and carry it out on a weekly basis.
And you mentioned this too, the fact they've done it all without Cedric Tillman is wildly impressive. I mean, you see what Jalen Hyatt did over the weekend, and again, I know that's sort of a sore subject because the kid's from 20 minutes from Columbia, and Muschamp didn't offer him, and we just won't get into it. Anthony, I appreciate you taking the time. Before I get you out of here, man, obviously I want to get your feel on this game Saturday. If you want to lock in a prediction, you're more than welcome to do so. You obviously said you thought the spread was going to open up more than it did. So are you leaning to the Aggie side of things? Obviously, night game at Williams-Brice should be a raucous environment. What do you feel on this game Saturday night between the Gamecocks and Texas A&M?
I'll go SC 27, A&M 13. I think it's going to be very difficult for A&M to score. Yeah, I think we're going to see if Haynes King is playing. I can't see them scoring. I know South Carolina's defense has some of their faults. I think Devonta Chain, I think that's how they're going to score. I think maybe he gets off like a 70-yard run or something like that, and that can score some points. But, from a passing perspective, Texas A&M just doesn't have the guys to do it. So I think that's kind of what comes to my prediction, and I think it could differ depending on what South Carolina does offensively. But Texas A&M's offense kind of a big reason behind that. But that's kind of my expectation for this weekend.
Anthony, sign me up for that score prediction right now. And it'd be crazy, man. Like I said, we talk about how it's such a week-to-week game. The Gamecocks could end up being 5-2 and could be staring potentially, you don't want to get ahead of yourself, but 7-2 is not off the table. I mean, that's wild to say when you think about some of the ups and downs of this season, but hey, you'll take it if you can get it. Anthony Treash of Pro Football Focus. You guys go check out his work. Anthony, as always, I appreciate you taking the time to chat, man. We'll do it again next week.
Of course. Thank you.
Yeah, man. We'll talk soon. Great stuff from Anthony Treash of Pro Football Focus.